It's with great pleasure I like to introduce the most prominent lawyer of the Sri Lankan community in Australia, an accredited immigration law specialist, Mr. Susantha Kampala. How are you, Susantha?
I'm well, thank you, Derek. Iboan.
Ivan, a student who's in the process of completing his course and getting a job for a period of 1 year. Do you think he will have a good chance?
If a student is getting a job offer for 1 year, period of 1 year, then they can apply for a subclass 457 visa with the support or sponsorship and the nomination of an employer in Australia. And that's an opportunity. However, if someone wants to apply for permanent residency in Australia, unemployed nomination scheme, they must have a 3-year contract. If the employer is located in a metropolitan area, in a main city, then they must have 3 years employment contract and also the right market salary. However, if the employer is in a regional area out of metropolitan Melbourne, metropolitan Sydney or Perth or Brisbane, then they need to have only 2 years contract, and also the requirement, the threshold are less. However, the people who want to apply for employer nomination will have to go through a tougher test, because they all need to prove that they are highly skilled. The definition of highly skilled is the 3 years post-qualification experience. So most of the students will have to obtain their skilled experience on their relevant skills, relevant field, on a temporary visa for at least for 3 years, and the opportunity is given. For an example, this 485 graduate skill visa is given for 18 months, and also for this visa to be granted, the government's taking 6 to 12 months. So any students who will be able to apply for 485 will have the opportunity to stay in the country for 2 years or more. So obtaining the experience in their skill occupation then that they're nominating, and then if they have the support of an Australian employer, a sponsorship and the nomination of an employer, it's an opportunity for a student or a recent graduate to obtain their permanent residency in Australia.
That makes it easier for them.
Yes, of course, yes. And also these students who are obtaining or applying for their graduate skill visas up to December 2012 will have 2 options eventually to obtain residency. One is the employer nomination scheme, employer nomination pathway. Pathway number 2 is a state-specific sponsored migration scheme. The government's intent to introduce a new skill list that will be only applicable to state sponsorships. That means each state will have the opportunity to sponsor people, sponsor skilled professionals and the tradespeople to bring those people to the particular state. It's a state-specific migration. It is actually an exercise of the devolution in this country, because we have the devolution of power. The states are given certain powers. However, the immigration belongs to the federal government, the Commonwealth government of Australia. However, the states are given the opportunity to sponsor people to choose the people that the particular state required, needed. Therefore, the state sponsorship will give the opportunity for people to come in out of the normal skill occupation list, less thresholds, less requirements, and also the people will have the commitment to or obligation to live in that state and work in that state, that is to meet the labor requirements in that particular state. The state-specific sponsored migration scheme is the way these students and many other migrants applying from overseas to come to Australia.
Offshore immigration temporarily suspended. Tell us what's going to happen.
Yes, the government decided to temporarily suspend the offshore migration applications under skill migration program on 8th of May 2010. Due to that, currently until end of the financial year, people won't be able to apply for offshore skill migration applications. However, it's going to be reopened on 1 July 2010 under the new skill occupation list. This will impose certain limitations for sponsors sponsoring their relatives in overseas and applicants applying from overseas. In particular, there was an opportunity for Australian sponsors, the relatives, the brothers, sisters, aunties or uncles could sponsor their relatives in overseas under skill migration program on general skill occupations such as office manager, the project administrator, general manager, marketing manager, the marketing specialist, management consultant. Those occupations were available for migration under the current list. And some people have done their English test, some people have done their skill assessments, completed their skill assessments, and all the requirements to be able to make the application. But if they have not made the application before 8th May 2010, they won't be able to make this application until 1st of July. By 1st of July, those occupations no longer going to be on the list. So certainly, certain number of applicants, and be thousands of applicants, going to be affected by these changes under the offshore skill migration program. Also, on 8th of February, the government announced the intention to cancel certain applications under offshore skill migration program that were made before 1 September 2007. In particular, the government intended to cancel people who made the application as cooks, hairdressers, pastry cooks, especially under pathway D of the trade assessment system, where people could migrate just with experience, no qualification were required, and those applications may be cancelled. And there are many thousands of applications pending pre-September 2007, but it's a political decision and it hasn't been approved 100%, but the government intend to cancel those applications. Therefore, if you have a relative that is going to affect, that's going to be affected by these changes, it is a sponsor's duty to approach their local parliamentarian and lobby to not to cancel these visas. And it is important for the sponsors in Australia, relatives eligible to sponsor their relatives, and under the family reunion system, to bring their relatives to Australia under the skill migration program. Either the relatives should have the opportunity to bring their relatives on family reunion without skills or any other category. There are opportunities there for spouse and the parents and certain relatives, but certain relatives will have to meet the skill requirements to come in. But under these current changes that are coming in, current policies that have been introduced, this offshore skills migration is going to be very limited for certain relatives come under sponsor categories, and therefore you need to look at that very closely as an Australian citizen.
There's many students, they get the wrong information talking to their mates, and how do they overcome this problem?
Basically, Australian immigration has become very complicated, and immigration law has become a complicated law. It has been a complicated area of law for many years because we have the Immigration Act, the regulations, and the policy, the PAMs. In addition, there are many high court cases, the tribunal decision, the federal court cases that will affect the immigration decisions by the government. And immigration is no longer form filling exercise. It is more than filling forms and lodging an application with the government. Therefore, any applicant, whether they are in Australia or offshore overseas, when they want to make the application for migration, it is very important, it's imperative that they seek and obtain proper advice, proper legal advice, correct advice to make sure that they meet the requirements without wasting their money, resources, and build up expectation and live in expectation. Especially if we make people to live on unrealistic expectations, and then if that's not going to come true, then people will be very disappointed. Therefore, always obtain proper advice and listen to the correct advice. Sometimes the correct advice is not always sounds good, sometimes bitter, but that's the reality. They're going to face the reality. It's always good to be honest, truthful, and face the reality, face the challenge, then you can be successful in your migration exercise.
Susantha, during this interview, I think you are given the right information, and let me thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan.